Hello and welcome to another tech tip by VMNerd. Today's topic is installing a virtual routing firewall using pFSense and VMware ESX. Our goal is to map out our build, download the pFSense image, upload the pFSense image into a ESX data store, create a virtual distributed switch and private VLANs, create the virtual machine shell, and install and configure the base pFSense OS. And with that, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to actually map out what it is we're actually trying to build. Okay, we all know that we're going to be building a virtual routing firewall with pFSense on top of an ESX host. But let's go ahead and put that on paper, at least the virtual machine components, because we do have to build out all the components associated with it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is we are going to need an actual pFSense virtual machine shell. Okay. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need some networking components. Okay, so one is going to be the WAN interface, which will be used for our internet and whatever connectivity we have to get into this thing. Okay. The next thing we're going to need is we are going to need a LAN interface, which is typically used by clients that are sitting behind the firewall. And I always like to add a third interface, and for this thing here, we'll just call it the HA interface for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect these up, and we'll put some numbers to these things here in just a moment. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put some numbers to these. Okay, so for the WAN, it's going to be VLAN 300. And the IP subnet is going to be 192.168.30.0/24. And for the pFSense box itself, we'll use, let's use like 221, some obscure number, 221, and it'll be a /24. I guess it doesn't really matter, but that'll be the IP we're going to use. Okay, and just to keep it the same across the board, with the exception of the LAN interface, we'll go ahead and, I guess it doesn't really matter because we're going to add a VIP as a part of this anyways. So, and we'll go ahead and do it this way. So for the LAN interface, we'll use VLAN 301. It'll be the IP subnet of 31/24, and the IP will be 221. And for the HA interface, do VLAN 302, and we'll do the same across the board just so that way it's consistent. And for this one, we will create a VIP of 192.31.254. I personally like using the upper IP since most routers, when you get them, they typically install them on like a number 1 or something. So I personally like using the higher number better. And we'll just call this a VIP. And we'll use a CARP VIP for later purposes, of course. Okay. And yeah, we'll go ahead and add one for this side as well. And for IP, we'll do 30.220. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to go to pFSense site and actually download their image. So let's do that. So we'll go to pfsense.org. And we will go ahead and download their image. So I personally like using the 64-bit image. They do have a 386, but I use a 64-bit usually. So we'll do the CD image, and I always grab the Texas one. Okay, so go ahead and download. Our image has successfully downloaded, so let's go ahead and just open the folder where it's at. And let's go ahead and open with our 7-zip program here. Okay. And if you look inside there, you'll actually see the ISO. And let's drag it right in there so that way it extracts the ISO. We don't need layers upon layers of stuff to kind of get through. So go ahead and do that real quick. So let's go ahead and minus this out. Pretty much done with the website. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and upload the pFSense image to our ESX data store. Okay, so we'll go ahead and log into our vCenter using our login credentials. The first thing we need to do is go ahead and find a data store to put this thing on. So pick, let's go and just pick the first one here. Okay. So I always like to create a little directory called software. And we'll go ahead and upload this data into there. So desktop ISO image, and it should go fairly quickly. All right, so our ISO image is complete. Okay, so let's go back to our drawing here. And if you look here, we have VLAN 300, which is our WAN, 301 is our LAN, and 302 is our HA. So let's go ahead and let's actually start building out the virtual networking component of this. So one of the things that they do tell you is when you are loading this on ESX, you need to make sure that you enable promiscuous mode on your vSwitch and make sure that the MAC address changes are allowed and any forged transmits are allowed. And you'll see what I mean as we go through it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is actually go and set up some virtual switches. So let's go ahead and create a new virtual distributed switch. Okay, we'll go ahead and create the most current one. Doesn't really matter, I don't think at this point. Call it whatever you want. And I'm not sure, I have a 10 gig one. We'll use this one here for our private VLANs. So we'll go ahead and add that now. And that's all we'll add here. Let's get rid of that ugly thing. Okay, so we need to add a couple of port groups, but before we do that, let's go ahead and add our private VLANs. So that's what I'd like to do. So let's go ahead and create a private VLAN group, a primary VLAN of 300. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to create sub VLANs inside there. Okay, so the first one's going to be 301, which will be a community VLAN. We're going to create one called 302, which will also be a community VLAN. Now the difference between isolated and community probably is what it sounds. Community means that anybody inside the VLAN can actually talk. Isolated means that any machine in there, they can't talk to each other. So it's kind of like putting east-west firewalls in between virtual machines. Okay, but we'll go ahead for this, we'll go ahead and do communities. And if you look at the top, the VLAN 300 is actually a promiscuous VLAN, meaning that, you know, if you have a virtual machine inside of VLAN 300, you can actually do VLAN tags into the community ones because they'll actually listen inside there. It's kind of like a trunk port in a virtual distributed switch. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just take this existing default group and we will go ahead and name this one. Okay, and we're going to call this just VDS and we'll call it VLAN 301. Actually, we'll do VLAN 300 and then we'll do pVLAN 301. That way I know it's a private VLAN. I don't think that really matters. So we do need to specify the VLAN itself. So go here to private and then go ahead and select the 301. Okay. And remember I was telling you before about the promiscuous, the MAC, and forged transmits. We will have to set these. So that's what this is, this promiscuous mode, MAC address changes, and forged transmit. Go ahead and enable those. And actually, you know what? I think we need to actually call this P for promiscuous. It's usually what I like to do. Yeah, we'll go ahead and enable this, and we'll call this the promiscuous one. When we go later on and we actually add virtual machines to this, we'll actually create another one without all of that for security's sake. It's okay for a firewall to do those kinds of things, not really okay for regular workstations. So we'll go ahead and adjust that. And the next thing we need to do is, I'll just copy this. I don't want to type it all twice. Go ahead and create a new port group. Same thing, only this time it'll be 302 and private VLAN. Now, it's kind of funny. Yeah, it is recommended that you do enable all those things on these port groups. But when it comes to the actual HA sync or the CARP interfaces, as they call it, actually, I really don't like turning it on there. Because when you do enable promiscuous, it actually does something to your bandwidth. It'll cut it back and put more pressure on the virtual machine to deliver. So, and to top it off, I've actually seen it cause problems actually with the syncing component itself. Since we're not going to run any CARP IPs on there, if we go back to our design, we don't have no VIPs. That shouldn't be a problem. So, go ahead and just do that. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is we actually need to go create a new, just a regular WAN uplink port or a WAN port group. Okay, and to do that, we actually need to do this the old-fashioned way here. Configuration, networking. We'll go ahead and just create a new port group. And to simplify this, call it VLAN 300. We'll just do 300. And this actually needs to be connected to our internet-facing interfaces. Okay. And we need to go here and enable promiscuous. So on this vSwitch by default, it doesn't actually allow it, but if you actually check the checkbox and click accept it, it'll take it, no problem. Okay. All right. And the next step that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually create the virtual machine shell for pFSense. Okay. So did we didn't really give it a name, but we're going to give it one now. Okay. We're going to call this pf01 and we'll call this just demo.vmnerd.com. Okay, that's what we'll actually call it. So when we actually go to add information into it, that's what we'll do. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our new VM. Okay, and typical sufficient. And call this pf01. You can type all that stuff out, but it does really look tacky, so we'll go ahead and not do that. And I want to keep this on my faster spindles. So we'll go ahead and put it here on one of our SSDs, at least for the installation purposes. Now for guest operating system, we need to select the FreeBSD 64-bit because if you remember, we actually downloaded the AMD one. They have an x86, and that would just mean basically 64 versus 32-bit. But we did download the AMD 64, so we'll go ahead and do the 64-bit installation. Number of NICs, we'll go ahead and do 3. And I personally like the VMX NAT 3. They tend to work great. So our first VLAN is going to be VLAN 300. The next VLAN is going to be 301. And the one after that's going to be 302. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do next. Depending on what kind of stuff you actually plan to put on it, you may want to size it accordingly. I usually do 16 gig. It's usually sufficient. But I have had instances where I've had to make it larger based on what I was doing. So let's go ahead and edit the virtual machine because based on the pre-configured specs, we should probably go in there and adjust it. I usually like to do 2 gig at a minimum, and I like to do a minimum of 2 cores, but depending on what it is you're doing, you may want to size that accordingly. So for what we're doing, it's sufficient. I also like to switch the SCSI controller to the SAS-based controller. It seems to work fine. Okay, and then from here we can go ahead and add the ISO image that we uploaded to our data store under the software folder. Okay. Okay. So we'll go ahead and power this guy on. And okay, so let this guy kind of do his thing. Yeah, the install is not very complicated. It's actually quite simple. So, okay, so right here we just need to hit I for install. It's going to take you into its installer screen. And really, really straightforward, very, very simple. Just accept the settings. There's really not much to change, at least not for what we're doing here. Click OK, OK, yes, next. Whatever other next options you have, you can click those too. Select your standard kernel. Since we don't have one of those low-powered machines, just a standard PC kernel is sufficient. Go ahead and click reboot. And if you notice right here, the default username and password, the username is admin, the password is pFSense. And we can go ahead and eject the drive, or we can just wait. We'll wait till this thing actually reboots and then do it. Okay, so now we can go ahead and eject it while this thing is actually going to boot up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and remove that. Okay, so remember before when we actually configured the order of the VMNICs? This is one thing that is kind of cool with VMware. If you predefine all your things up front, whatever order these are in are actually the same order as what is shown in the console. So this would be VMX 0, 1, 2. Early on when I think it was version 5 of ESX or 5.1, it actually would switch NIC 1 and 2 for some strange reason. But in our particular case, it now actually keeps it, which is kind of good. Say it makes things easier. Otherwise, you can go in and check all the MACs if you want to validate. So we're not going to do any VLAN since we did it at the port group layer. And let's go ahead and click no here. Okay. The next thing we need to do is actually define what interface is which. So for our WAN interface, we're going to go ahead and do VMX 0. For our LAN interface, it's going to be VMX 1. And it's our optional interface, but we'll call it HA. But for here, it's VMX 2. Okay, go ahead and click next. Yes, you accept. And we'll let this thing boot up. And there we go. Okay, so if you look right here, we already have an IP address of 30.100. So one thing I like to do is, because of the fact that I don't have a PC on the LAN subnet yet, actually that is one thing I want to talk about. So let's go back to our drawing here. And if you look here on the WAN interface, we don't have anything on the LAN interface. However, the workstation that we are currently running from is actually on the WAN network. So we could just put our workstation. Okay, so this is our workstation, okay? And we're actually going to be in the same IP range as VLAN 300. So we can technically get in through the WAN interface. Okay, well, obviously, since you're connecting to a firewall, typically that's restricted. One of the things I like to do when I'm going to do this is I actually will go ahead and actually disable all of pFSense while I'm doing this, at least the rule from a rule perspective. So I usually hit Option 8, which takes me into the shell, and I run a pfctl-d to disable all the rules. Okay. So from here, I'll go ahead and open up, and we will go ahead and connect to the IP that it was actually assigned. In our case, if you look there, it's 192.168.30.100. So we'll just type this in here at the browser, 30.100. Okay, if you look, we're already connected. And you remember our default username, which is admin, and the password is pFSense. Let's go ahead and do that. I really don't want to save it, so we're not going to. And I just clicked the Community Edition because I already know what I'm going to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to go into the WAN interface and actually we need to disable bog-on networks and private networks. Okay, and the reason why is because we actually are on a private network. So the 192.168, if you look right here, by default, it will be blocked. Bog-ins we can probably enable a little later, but for now, at least for the demonstration purpose, we'll go ahead and disable it. Go ahead and click the Save button, and don't click Apply here because we're not done yet. The next thing we want to do is go into the rules, and before, if you're familiar with pFSense, there'll actually be two rules here. There'll be one for bog-ins and then one for the private networking. Okay, so they're actually gone now that we've actually unchecked those checkboxes. Let's go ahead and add a rule. Okay, and the rule is going to be real simple. We're going to allow TCP source is going to be the WAN net, which will be the 192.168.30.0/24, and then the destination, let's go ahead and just choose firewall. Okay. Okay, and for the port, we'll do HTTPS. Okay. And I want to do one more, so let's go ahead and do one more. And we'll go ahead and we'll just do ICMP so we can at least ping it. Okay, and we'll do any, and we'll do WAN subnet, and we'll do this firewall. Okay, go ahead and click Save. And now, if you click Apply, it's kind of goofy, but if you click Apply, the pFSense will actually re-enable the rules, and then you'll get locked out. You'll have to go in there and do it again. So what I like to do is I usually just reboot it. So otherwise I got to go back to the console. It's just more drama. That's not necessary. So go ahead and reboot. pFSense. Okay, so now we can actually get started with our customization. So one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't actually set our WAN IP address. So let's go ahead and do that first. Okay. Go ahead and set this to static. And I actually like to disable this if we can. I don't know, it might complain. We'll see. Static, and then our IP that we selected here is 221. So 192.168.30.221, and it's a /24, which is what we talked about. Now we will need to add a default gateway. Okay. And the default gateway will be, and click Add. It's going to be 192.168.30.254. Okay. And we should be able to click Save. Nah, I don't care. Let's go ahead and click Apply. Okay, we will lose our connectivity, but we just specify the new IP. So in this case, it's going to be 221. I think what we did. Yep. Okay, so we're already back in. Okay. Okay. All right. So next thing I want to do, let's go ahead and take care of our LAN interface. Actually, you know what? You see how IPv6 track interface? I personally like to disable the DHCP server. Let's go ahead and do that since we don't really, at least we don't plan to use it for this demonstration. So let's go back to our interfaces, configure LAN, and I want to actually disable it because honestly I really don't care for it. So for our IP, I think we selected, let's go back, we did 31.221. We don't really need to specify an upstream gateway, so we will not do that. Go ahead and click Save. Go ahead and click Apply. And let's go ahead and configure our HA interface. Okay. Just call this HA. PV4. I think we did 32, yes. Okay. So I'm going to do 32.221. Yeah, I like making the IPs the same. It's easier to remember and keep track of them. So, okay, so go ahead and click Apply. Okay, so now the next thing I'd like to do is let's go ahead and go to the General Setup tab, and let's go ahead. Remember, we named our pFSense box. We called it pf01, so let's go ahead and call it that, pf01. And for domain name, demo.vmware.com. And for our DNS server, we will use 192.168.30.1. We don't really have to mess with any of this other stuff right now, so we'll go ahead and leave that alone. Just everything else is fine. I personally like this new red one that they came out with, so I'll go ahead and turn that on, just because I think it looks cool. It's very nice. Okay. All right, so the next thing we need to do is go ahead and build out our CARP VIP interfaces. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Interface. Actually, it's under virtual IPs. Let's go ahead and click that. We'll go ahead and do a CARP interface here on the WAN side. And we called it 220, right? So actually, if we type it in, it'll get smart. .30.220. And then we'll do /24. For password, you can put whatever you want. For some simple sake here, I'm just going to call it that. And I always start out at 10, because you never know, someday I might actually need to go lower than that. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and add the one for the LAN side. Okay, CARP LAN side, and we did 192.168.31.254. Again, automatically adjust that, and again we'll use the same password that we used before. Click save, and we'll go ahead and click apply. Now, because of all the changes we made, it's just letting us know things are going on, so we need to go make some adjustments. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do those. Okay, so with our new IP addresses saved and everything, let's go ahead and just try and test the internet-facing one, which is the 30.220. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead and ping it. Okay, and we know that we're 221, right? So there you go. 2 IPs are responding. Now, the error message that we got earlier, we just need to fix the DHCP services, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go to DHCP server. On the LAN side, we'll go ahead and do some adjustments here. So 31, and we'll do 100 to 31.199. We will have to specify DNS server. So we'll do 192.168.31.254 because we're going to use our CARP interface. And same thing with our gateway, at least for this demonstration. And for domain name, we'll use the demo VMWare.com. And search list, I like to add that in there as well. You technically don't have to, but I personally like to add it. And that should do that. Okay, and the next step we need to do is, let's go ahead and go to our NAT Translation and fix our outbound NATs. So by default, everything's going to default to the WAN interface IP, which if you go back to our Visio diagram is going to be the 192.168.30.221. And that's not what we want. So let's go ahead and adjust that so that way it's always going to go out that shared IP address that we're going to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a manual. Click save. Go ahead and apply it. It doesn't really matter yet. Let's go down here and adjust the IPs. Okay, so go ahead and click edit. Where it says interface address, we're going to drop down and go to the 30.220. Save, and we're just going to do this for the rest of these. Yeah. Save. And we'll leave these ones here, the ones for the local machine. The reason why is because DNS and all that still needs to function. And if you're in an actual CARP situation where you have 2 pFSense firewalls, you want to make sure that they can still get to the internet to do their name resolution. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and apply the change. And one final step, we need to actually go into the DNS Resolver, which by default, they actually enable the U-bound service. Okay, and you can do all these interfaces, but personally I like to just enable on the ones that really need it. So localhost is one, so that way the firewall itself can resolve. And then for the any of the clients that need to be on there. So in our case, it's going to be 31.254, and I also like to enable the interface itself. So for translation purposes, and outgoing, I just put them all. It doesn't really matter, I guess. Okay, and then I do like to register our DHCP, the statics and the regulars. So go ahead and click Save. Go ahead and apply. And then the one last and final thing is this access control list. And then from here, I just put trusted networks. Okay, so we'll go ahead and enable our trusted networks. .31.0/24. And I think they said by default it'll actually do this for you, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. 127.0.1.1, and that can be a 32, I think. Oh, guess we'll have to use that. Yeah, whatever, we'll do 0. And we'll just do /24. Whatever, anything in that area. Go ahead and save. And that concludes our topic today of installing a virtual routing firewall using pFSense and VMware ESX. Hey guys, don't forget to check out our VM Nerd YouTube channel for more tech tips.